Hello, and thank you for being here. Before we go any further, I want to take a moment to properly introduce myself, because context matters. My name is Jonathan Bengal. I'm an IRS enrolled agent, which means I'm federally licensed to represent taxpayers before the IRS. I'm also a certified tax strategist, one of fewer than 60 worldwide trained specifically in proactive planning, not just compliance or cleanup after the fact. I'm also the #1 best-selling author of The ABCs of Deductions, a practical guide written to help business owners and leaders understand what they can legally deduct, how the tax code actually works in real life, and how to stop leaving money on the table simply because no one ever explained the rules clearly. For over a decade, my work has lived at the intersection of money, compliance, and human behavior. I've advised thousands of high-stakes decisions across businesses and missions-driven organizations. Decisions that have added up to millions of dollars, preserved or lost, depending on clarity. What matters to me isn't the number. It's what those dollars made possible or prevented. Stability instead of crisis. Longevity instead of burnout. Fewer moments where leaders were forced to choose between protecting the mission and protecting themselves. Rules matter deeply in my work. But what I've learned is that rules don't operate in isolation. They operate inside patterns of human decision-making, how choices are made, where leaders get stuck, and how good intentions can unintentionally create risk when clarity is missing. I've worked with founders, executives, and mission-driven organizations who care deeply about doing good in the world, but who were never taught how to steward their organizations with the same care they bring to their cause. What I've seen again and again is this: nonprofits rarely struggle because they lack heart. They struggle because no one ever gave them a clear, grounded framework for thinking about money, structure, and sustainability without fear. That's why I was invited into this conversation. This time together is not about tax law, technical instruction, or compliance checklists. It's about perspective. It's about helping you think differently so that the decisions you make feel calmer, clearer, and more aligned with the mission you're carrying. If you're here because you care deeply about a cause, a community, or a purpose larger than yourself, you're exactly where you're meant to be. Let's name something that almost never gets said out loud. Nonprofits are often rich in heart and poor in clarity. The passion is there, the commitment is there, the long nights, the volunteer hours, the emotional investment, it's all there. What's often missing is not intelligence or effort, but structure. Not just financial structure, but mental structure. When clarity is missing, pressure increases. I see this constantly. Leaders who are afraid of money, suspicious of strategy, or quietly overwhelmed by compliance. There's an underlying belief that if you focus too much on numbers, you somehow dilute the purity of the mission. That belief, while understandable, is dangerous because money is not the enemy of mission. Confusion is. When clarity is avoided, chaos fills the gap, and chaos is expensive financially, emotionally, and operationally. Before we ever talk about tactics, rules, or processes, we have to talk about orientation. How leaders orient themselves to decisions determines how those decisions land. Here's the reframe I want to offer you, and I want you to really sit with this for a moment. You are not bad at money. You are not behind. You are not doing it wrong. Most nonprofit leaders were simply never given a clear way to approach financial decisions without pressure or shame attached to them. In the nonprofit world, money often carries emotional weight. It can feel loaded, scarce, uncomfortable. Money itself isn't moral or immoral. It's directional. When leaders avoid clarity, the organization doesn't become more pure, it becomes more fragile. I've seen passionate leaders unintentionally undermine their own missions because caring deeply felt like enough. Caring is essential, but caring without structure leads to exhaustion. Clear orientation creates steady action. Without it, even good tactics fail. Tact is not about being clever. It's about being intentional. It applies just enough effort in the right direction at the right time. Tact asks better questions before taking action. It slows decisions down just enough to avoid regret. It asks, what's the downstream effect of this choice? In the nonprofit world, lack of tact often shows up as doing things the way we've always done them, avoiding hard conversations until they explode, treating compliance as an afterthought instead of a foundation. Tact is what allows you to grow without breaking. Let me give you something you can actually use, something practical, repeatable, and calm. I call this the stewardship check. This is a 3-part framework you can run any meaningful decision through before you say yes. Financial decisions, staffing decisions, program decisions, growth decisions. This framework creates a deliberate pause between urgency and action. Before you move forward, pause and ask yourself these 3 questions. First, does this decision protect the mission? Not just emotionally, structurally. Will this choice preserve your ability to serve 6 months from now, a year from now, or does it quietly trade long-term impact for short-term relief? Mission drift rarely happens in dramatic moments. It happens in small compromises made under pressure. And second, does this decision protect the people? This includes your staff, your volunteers, your leadership team, and you. Burnout is not noble. Exhaustion is not a leadership strategy. In Buddhist teachings, compassion includes oneself. If a decision slowly drains your people, it will eventually drain your mission. Third, does this decision protect the organization long term? This is where tact lives. Compliance, documentation, reserves, clear roles, clean processes. These things are often dismissed as boring or bureaucratic, but they are what keeps nonprofits alive during seasons of uncertainty. If a decision fails even one of these checks, it doesn't mean the answer is no. It means the decision needs refinement. This framework allows you to lead with both heart and structure. I want to slow this down for a moment and share something personal. Because what I'm about to teach you didn't come only from advising others. It came from building something with my own hands. You see, before COVID, I founded a nonprofit called the Phoenix Renaissance Orchestra. The idea was simple, and in many ways, deeply human. It was created for adults 30 and up who had once played string instruments and wanted to reconnect with music in a judge and shame-free environment. There were no auditions, no rankings, no hierarchy of worth. All you needed to know was how to play your instrument, read music, and count. And that was it. We started with 5 core members, 5 people brave enough to sit back down with an instrument they hadn't touched in years, and sometimes decades. Over time, something beautiful happened. Word spread. The room filled. Eventually, we grew to a 25-musician orchestra. We attracted players from professional symphonies and orchestras, people who didn't need the music to prove anything more. They came because the space was safe, because the structure was clear, because the expectations were humane. From a Buddhist lens, this made perfect sense. When suffering is removed, presence emerges. When judgment dissolves, participation deepens. The orchestra wasn't just about music. It was about belonging. And then COVID arrived. Rehearsals stopped, momentum paused. Like so many organizations, we assumed it would be temporary. Weeks turned into months, months into uncertainty. Despite real effort, real care, and real intention, the orchestra never fully came back. That experience taught me something humbling. Even healthy, mission-driven organizations are fragile. Impermanence is not a flaw. It's a law of reality. In Buddhism, we're taught that attachment to permanence creates suffering. I lived that lesson firsthand. Passion alone does not guarantee sustainability. Heart alone does not protect structure. And just because the word nonprofit is in the name does not mean money doesn't matter. Nonprofits absolutely make money. They have to. Rent, insurance, instrument, space, logistics, none of that runs on intention alone. What makes a nonprofit different is not whether money exists, but what the money is in service of. When leaders avoid talking about money clearly, it doesn't make the organization more ethical. It makes it more vulnerable. That realization reshaped how I think about stewardship, leadership, and responsibility. There's a myth in the nonprofit world that quietly causes more damage than almost anything else, and it needs to be addressed directly. Somewhere along the way, many leaders absorbed the idea that being a nonprofit means you're not supposed to make money, or that wanting financial abundance somehow compromises the purity of your mission. That's simply not true. Nonprofit does not mean non-earning. It means that profit is not the motive. From a legal and structural standpoint, nonprofits absolutely generate revenue. They're meant to. They have payroll, rent, insurance, programming costs, reserves, and long-term obligations. What makes a nonprofit different is not whether money exists, but how excess revenue is treated. Uncle Sam doesn't tax nonprofit surplus because the money is required to stay inside the organization, supporting the mission, strengthening the structure, and extending impact. The absence of profit as a motive does not make abundance unethical. It makes stewardship essential. When nonprofit leaders believe they are unworthy of financial stability or growth, they unintentionally starve the very mission they're trying to protect. Healthy revenue creates choice. Choice creates resilience. Resilience allows the mission to endure. Money, in this context, is not greed. It's capacity. And denying capacity is not virtuous. It's risky. One of the most damaging myths in the nonprofit space is the idea that strategy is something you earn once you're big enough. Strategy is not a luxury. It is a stabilizer. Small organizations need strategy more, not less, because the margin for error is thinner. When you skip strategy, you don't save time. You borrow stress from the future. You pay for it later in firefighting instead of planning, reactive decisions instead of intentional ones, emotional fatigue instead of sustainable momentum. Strategy doesn't require a 40-page plan. It requires asking better questions. What are we really trying to protect here? What would make this easier 6 months from now? What problem are we solving and which one are we creating? The people you serve do not benefit from your exhaustion. Your board does not benefit from your silence. And your mission does not benefit from leaders who are constantly bracing for impact. Calm leadership is not passive. It is precise. Calm comes from clarity. Clarity comes from tact. When you slow down just enough to think clearly, you lead more effectively, even in chaos. If you take nothing else from our time together, take this. You are allowed to be both mission-driven and strategically grounded. You are allowed to ask for clarity. You are allowed to slow down long enough to do things right. Your mission matters too much to run on anxiety alone. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for your courage. And thank you for receiving this gifted wisdom. May your leadership feel steadier tomorrow than it did yesterday. And I'll leave you with this one final thought. As the Buddha taught, we cannot truly possess anything, not outcomes, not certainty, not even our emotions. Joy and happiness, like everything else, are meant to move forward through us, not belonging to us. In this moment, I feel a deep sense of joy and gratitude for the opportunity to share these reflections with you. And rather than holding on to that feeling, I want to offer it outward as a small but sincere prayer, especially for those who may now need it more than ever. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you never be separated from your happiness. Om Mani Padme Hum.